Good morning, everybody.
Recording
Welcome
in
to the Metropolitan Governance Task Force for this Wednesday, October 25th.
Recording
And
stopped.
our first item of, we do have a
Recording in
quorum.
progress.
Whoops. We do have a quorum. And I didn't really assign anyone to move the minutes. So if someone wants to take a quick look and.
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the previous meeting minutes on October 11, 2023, as published.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bigham. Is there discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, the motion prevails. So members, we have a very interesting and involved agenda today, and so we'll just, I'll get into some of the substance of that in a second. But the first thing I wanted to do is give an update on our public engagement. We have dates, and we're just going to finalize some locations today. And our goal, so we'll have 3 meetings, and we're going to hold those in accordance with the legal guidelines that we have discussed in terms of keeping in consistent with the legislation. And so I think, at this point, we'll probably do one in the West Metro, one in the East Metro, one in the city, but we're still deciding. Everyone had good suggestions. I think everyone was very interested in having them in their own communities, which is great. And, there is a possibility of, potentially adding a couple we don't know yet, but we will have 3, and those will take place in November and December, and I'll let you know. So, and thank you for everyone that weighed in on that. So again, the dates now are November 6th, December 14th, and January 9th. So, and I think 2 of those will be in the evening, one will be during, at the noon hour, correct, Ms. Keller? Mm-hmm. So we'll get information out to you on that once it's finalized. So members, there's 2 real important things that we're going to be doing today. And the first is a presentation from the Metropolitan Council on their transit and transportation functions. We had, you'll recall, last month, we had, or maybe even earlier this month, we had a thorough conversation about some of the other regional systems, community development, housing, parks, and today we really wanted to have a separate meeting about transportation and transit because that is a huge part. Oh, we had wastewater too last time, sorry. And this is a very important part of the Metropolitan Council's function, and one, quite frankly, that is, I think, generated the most interest, I think, in the broader public. So we wanted to make sure that we had an hour for this. And then embedded in this presentation, we'll also have a conversation with the Met Council on issues that have been raised in the task force about how the Met Council sees its jurisdiction, its structure as well, from a legal standpoint. I know we've had several task force members have asked other testifiers about this, so we wanted to have the Met Council come directly to do that. So, and then after that, we're going to have another piece to the agenda around vision and goal setting for the task force. We haven't really had that conversation in terms of what is our end goal here in terms of the values, the overriding values we would want in a structure. We've heard a lot of testimony, a lot of background information, but really haven't had that opportunity for a conversation here in the task force. So we'll do that following the Met Council presentation. So any questions from task force members on our agenda today? Professor Orfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When can we ask questions about the structure after the presentation?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is first talk about transit, and then, again, there was correspondence from the task force to the Met Council, and I think we'll do that after that. Correct? Okay, good. So with that, members, I'd like to call on Leslie Canderas, Metro Transit's General Manager. Nick Thompson is here, the Assistant General Manager for Capital Projects, and Charles Carlson from Transportation Services. All have come and been very generous with their time, and no strangers to the Transportation Committee, at least. So welcome to the committee, and before your testimony, please state your name for the record and then proceed.
Chair Hornstein, task force members, thank you for having us here today. My name is Leslie Canderas, and I am the general manager of Metro Transit. And, let's see if I can click ahead here. No, there we go. And as the chair shared, we're here really to continue providing the Metropolitan Council overview that started back on September 27th, where you heard from our Environmental Services Division and our Community Development Division. Today, we're the three divisions that focus on transportation and transit for the Metropolitan Council. So I'll start off with a brief presentation on Metro Transit. I'll hand it over to Nick Thompson, the Interim Executive Director of Metro Projects for Metro Transit, which is a new division of the council created earlier this year to advance light rail and bus rapid transit capital projects. And then finally, Charles Carlson, the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Transportation Services, will provide an overview of the Metropolitan Transportation Services Division. The first couple slides here, just a refresher of where our colleagues, the Environmental Services General Manager and the Community Development Executive Director left off back in September. As you're well aware, the Metropolitan Council was created by the legislature back in 1967. The Metropolitan Council plans for the orderly and economical development of the region and provides essential services to the region. And this work includes establishing regional growth policies and long-range plans for transportation, aviation, water resources, regional parks, housing, and water supply. This is also a refresher slide. I think the main message here is our region has over 3 million people. It continues to grow. It is a very diverse region, and that's all part of what the council takes into account when doing this work. The focus of these presentations really is to provide this task force with an agency structure and sense of the work we do. At your last meeting or at your September 27th meeting, I should say, the focus was really on the green and blue areas here, long-range planning, environmental protection. Today, we're bringing in the transportation services piece of our agency's work. And again, the Metropolitan Council being created by the legislature, we carry out work we have authority to carry out in state law. So today we'll be talking about some of those authorities as it pertains to transportation throughout our presentations. So now moving on specifically to Metro Transit. So again, Metro Transit is a division of the Metropolitan Council. We operate bus service, light rail, commuter rail. Metro Transit serves just over 70 communities in the metropolitan region. Currently, our ridership is approximately 55% system-wide of where we were pre-COVID. It continues to grow. Ridership in 2023 is higher than it was in 2022. And currently, we're providing anywhere between 120 to 140,000 rides each weekday. In addition to our ridership not being quite where we were pre-COVID, we're still building back service levels as well. System-wide, we're around 75% of where we were before the pandemic. And really, our primary constraint to adding additional service remains our workforce constraint. We continue to have a shortage of operators, both on our bus and rail sides. And as we're able to recruit and retain more operators, that's allowing us to build back service. Just for some context, every quarter Metro Transit makes some service adjustments, and as we're heading into our December service changes, we anticipate we'll be up to about 79% of our pre-COVID levels. And I should say too, that's really a system-wide number. If you look at different modes, for example, at our BRT and local bus modes, we're closer to 89% in December of what we were pre-COVID. Contrast that with commuter express routes, where we're more around 26% of what we were pre-COVID. So again, as we're able to bring back operators, we're able to grow service further as well. And just to give you a bit more flavor about the Metro Transit division, we have currently more than 2,700 employees on staff right now. If we were fully staffed up, we'd be over 3,000. Our 2023 operating budget is just over $530 million. Our 6-year capital program is $6.75 billion. And we have many initiatives underway, including initiatives really driven by some of the elements of the transportation omnibus that was passed earlier this year. We continue to advance our safety and security action plan. This is a plan that was developed by the Metropolitan Council and approved back in June of 2022. It includes over 40 action items to address concerns relating to public safety on our system. And continues to focus on getting more presence on the system, both police officers and non-sworn staff, really making improvements at our facilities to ensure they're well-maintained and signify that these are well-regulated spaces. And we've integrated several elements of the transportation omnibus that related to public safety, including the Transit Rider Investment Program, the Transit Service Intervention Project, requirements to establish cleaning and repair standards for our facilities and our vehicles. All of that is now wrapped into our safety and security action plan that we continue to advance. The Network Now project is another project we were getting going just about this time last year. That's really an opportunity to engage with community, to listen and learn how their transit needs have changed over the tumultuous last few years. We know travel behavior has changed during and through the pandemic. And Network Now is really a project to get reconnected with riders and communities to understand needs and priorities as it relates to transit, establish a decision-making framework for service additions as we move forward, as again, we're able to hire more operators. This Network Now project will guide how those additional operator resources are invested. Our speed and reliability program, you'll hear from Mr. Thompson about arterial bus rapid transit, which is a premier way of speeding up some of our highest ridership routes. In addition to that, routes that are not designated for BRT treatment, we still use transit signal priority, bus-only lanes, re-examine stop spacing, and use that as an opportunity to improve that customer experience. And I know part of the transportation omnibus this year included the transit signal priority work group, which is underway and will be providing a report to the legislature in February of next year about additional opportunities in that space. The zero emissions bus transition plan back in 2021, the legislature required the council to establish a zero emissions bus transition plan, which was submitted to legislature in February of 2022. As part of that, Metro Transit set a target of between 2022 and 2027, having 20% of our replacement 40-foot buses be electric buses. And thanks to the investment of the new sales tax, we're able to continue advancing that plan. And so that work is underway. And in fact, there are 2 public meetings yet this week to provide updates to people interested on our progress along those plans. I mentioned earlier, workforce remains a big focus of ours, not only rebuilding and building up our operator workforce, but also mechanics, public facilities workers, police officers, non-sworn staff to provide presence. So much of our focus right now is really making sure we are an employer of choice and able to attract and retain the people it will take to both operate and maintain what we have today and keep up pace as we continue to expand into the future. And finally, I'll mention we're just now really starting to unveil our next strategic planning process. Metro Transit has long had a strategic plan to guide our work. And starting in November, we're going to invite community to a set of conversations to help us really understand what our vision for Metro Transit operations should be moving forward and how we can start reflecting that in our strategic plan. So that work is really getting underway, starting with a meeting on November 2nd. And last but not least, I'll just mention that we do provide a lot of information on our website, and this page in particular, the metrotransit.org/performance page, includes crime data and ridership data, and we update that each month. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Nick Thompson.
Chair, committee members, for the record, Nick Thompson, Interim Executive Director of the new Metro Projects for Metro Transit Division. So this new division formed this spring at the council is really responsible for delivering the major transitway projects in our transit network. These are the Metro projects, which is the brand for the transitway projects that are all-day, fast, frequent, reliable transitways that are both light rail, BRT, and arterial BRT. Our division's tasks are to do the project development, lead the engineering of these projects, and then in many cases oversee the construction of these projects for when they're complete to turn back to Metro Transit to operate them. Currently, we are leading 2 light rail projects, 2 dedicated BRT projects, and several arterial BRT projects. If there's new transitways that are developed in the region, they would be managed through this new division. The structure of this division is unique to each project. Our projects often involve an org chart that includes county staff, MnDOT staff, and several consultants. Project team members may work on one project or multiple projects depending on their technical ability or what phase the project is in for that as it's developing. So we operate under a variety of legislative directions that depends somewhat on the mode. There's a direction for construction and operations. Recently, with the past session, there was a clear direction that Metro Transit is now responsible for capital maintenance, so that was clarified this year. There is statutes for light rail transit that are separate from BRT, particularly around municipal consent and corridor management committees. But we try to be consistent across the transitways under these statutes. So this is the vision that the region is currently building. If you think about where we're at with the Metro Transitway vision, we are about halfway through building this vision. This is the current adopted regional vision that started really with the Blue Line or the Hiawatha Line in 2004. It has really accelerated. It has been the vision for well over a decade, adopted through a variety of planning processes, both local and regional. We are, currently halfway through and anticipated that this vision will be complete and open to the public and used by the public by 2030. So where we're at with different phases, we've completed portions of that vision. We have the blue, green, red, orange, and A, C, and D arterial BRTs in operation today. We currently have Green Line extension, Gold Line, and the B Line under construction. Next year, we will also add E Line to the currently active projects in construction. And then we have the pipeline of projects that are in various phases we can talk about today. So the role of this division and the role of Metro Transit and Met Council sort of depends somewhat on the mode and where the phase is for the project. The counties play a strong role in leading the development of selection of a mode and alignment of a transitway. This division leads the project development phase, engineering, construction phase for light rail. Light rail can be either led by the Met Council or by MnDOT. It's per statute. The governor designates one of those 2 agencies to lead the project development, engineering, construction phases. Currently, Met Council is designated for the light rail projects that are under development. Highway BRT, again, starts at the county level for transitways as they lead the project development or the planning phase to determine where a highway BRT can be located. They're the local funder of a highway BRT. Once it begins the engineering construction phase, our most recent highway BRT is the Orange Line. That was built both by MnDOT, portions of it were built by MnDOT, and portions of it by Metro Transit. So a project like that could depend on who the lead agency is based on other construction that is occurring. And then our arterial BRT is led by the council. Arterial BRT is essentially an upgrade of an existing local bus route. And so we lead all phases of that in terms of planning, project development, prioritization. The construction of the ABRT depends on the local road authority or Metro Transit. We have multiple ABRTs that are built either through a county project, a MnDOT project, or we have a current example of the G line that portions of it will be built by Ramsey County, portions by the city of St. Paul, portions by MnDOT, and portions by Metro Transit. And so arterial BRT has a little bit more complex delivery, but generally Metro Transit and this division lead that effort on these projects. So stepping back a little bit, it's important to understand the different phases. This is sort of the pipeline we talk about in terms of development of a major transitway. And this is applicable mostly for dedicated BRT like Gold Line or LRT. There's the initial planning phase that is 100% led by the county, funded by the county, where that planning mode is. They have a planning process that looks at multiple routes, multiple modes, that sort of ends with a locally preferred alternative that is recommended by the communities that project falls in. Once the locally preferred alternative is decided, which decides mode, route, and sometimes stations, it is adopted into the Met Council's transportation policy plan. And there's a phase in there that it becomes this new division's responsibility to deliver that project. That could be right after the LPA is adopted, or it may be several years later that project becomes an active project. The county continues to play that role as the funder in this scenario. They fund this all the way up until the engineering phase, where it becomes, we seek federal funding for these projects, that up to 50% of the project engineering, project development, and construction is federally funded. And the county provides, for the most part, the county or counties provides for the most part the local share or the local match to that funding. Each project, though, is a little bit different. The state has played a role in funding portions of the capital investment, and there is some local components to some of these projects also. And then in the end, Metro Transit, with the new legislation, Metro Transit is now, for the first time, 100% responsible for the operations funding, and we've clarified that responsible for the long-term capital maintenance of these projects. Each of the phases here is a decision point on whether you move a project forward. In the past year, the council has adopted the Transway Advancement Policy that sort of guides how we look at these projects in the context of the overall vision for the council, and makes a decision whether the council and our partners make a decision whether the project is ripe to move forward to the next phase or not. The local governmental units where the projects are being developed have a key role in each of these projects. They play both an advisory role, they also have approval role, and so it depends on the phase that we're in. Generally we have corridor management committees. Statute dictates the light rail transit corridor management committee makeup. We have generally followed that for the dedicated BRT also. I have corridor management committees. That's a really good process that is made up of both the counties, the cities, MnDOT, Metro Transit, in some cases, some local nonprofits or local advisory committees are part of that decision-making. The advisory committees really shape the project itself in the key planning role of what mode it is, where the stations will be, what the alignment is, when the project advances, whether it's ready to advance. They're advisory, but the Metro Council has taken the direction of the Advisory Council as not moving forward unless there's support from advisory councils. These advisory councils also have advisory councils to them. We have business advisory councils often and community advisory councils made up of members, business owners, and community members within the corridors that really guide and advise these projects as they develop. These are long-term projects. It is not, these are decades-long processes to get from the first idea of a project to the day we open that project can be 2 or 3 decades long. We do have official approval processes. Light rail transit has the most formal for municipal consent, where each community will seek, we follow state statute on approval of these projects. These are long projects that often affect multiple communities. So we need approval of each city along that route, the county, and in some cases, the park boards also, depending on the project. In general, for BRT, we have not, there isn't a statute that guides municipal consent, but we have always sought municipal approval for a BRT so that we should know that the community where this is being proposed is supportive of the project. The other major component of these projects is public engagement. This public engagement is ongoing from the beginning through the end. It takes many different phases. It is, and it changes over time. We, when the county is the lead agency, they're the lead of the public engagement process. And so there may be 10 or 20 years where a county is leading the public engagement process. And that is an individual engagement with maybe a property owner, to a community engagement, to a user engagement. It really depends. It's very extensive and ongoing and tracked. The public engagement both is required, and it informs both the technical and the policy elements of whether the project advances and what that project looks like. We've just a couple examples of the thousands of interactions we have here, and we take, this public engagement directly informs whether these projects and how they are built. So it is extensive. It is dictated both by federal law, state law, community, and just good practices of how we do engagement, both for an individual project, but for this vision that we're implementing itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just repositioning to get in front of a microphone. I'm Charles Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of Metropolitan Transportation Services at the Metropolitan Council. I'll refer to it as MTS for short to make sure we fit our time limit today. Next slide, please. So within MTS, we have two primary functions. One is functioning as the planning agency for the region for transportation planning under federal and state law and requirements. Within this, we do a number of planning functions that I'll describe in more detail in a future slide. We also operate transit services, in this case, services that are contracted. So we contract and coordinate operations that include fixed route bus. Metro Mobility is our largest program, Transit Link, a van pool program in the region, and coordination and assistance to replacement service providers, which we'll describe. This slide just shows some of the general legislative direction that we operate under on the transit operations side. So providing for contracted services, the Metro Mobility Program, also known as the Special Transportation Service, the opt-out or suburban provider under the Replacement Service Provider Assistance statute, as well as organizing and running the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee, which has a particular focus on transit accessibility. On the next slide, within our contracted transit services, we operate really a family of service. So there is fixed route service, which complements Metro Transit's fixed route service. In MTS, we operate this under a number of different transit service contracts that operate both local and express fixed route services. As I mentioned, Metro Mobility is our largest program, accounting for around 100 of our $140 million operating budget as a division. So Metro Mobility is a shared ride public transportation service for certified riders unable to use regular fixed route buses due to a disability or a health condition. So this program falls under regulatory structures at both the state and federal level. But importantly, it's most significantly under the Americans with Disabilities Act as a paratransit complementary service with further enhancement to that program as established in state law under 473-386, most notably expanding the service geography to a number of cities, not just the buffer area around all-day fixed route transit service. We also operate Transit Link, which is a shared ride service for the general public in areas where regular route transit is not an option. We last year began Metro Transit Micro, so this is a partnership with Metro Transit, but it is a contracted service of MTS, which is a on-demand dial-a-ride service that is used summoned primarily through a app that customers use. We have a pilot project underway. It began in 2022. We've begun the second year of that pilot, which will run through September of 2024. We also operate a van pool program that range in size between 5 and 15 people, sharing a ride to and from work. Usually it's 3 or more days a week. So that system continues and has actually grown in the last year. And then finally, some regional services across providers. So fleet technology, grants management, and other functions, not just for MTS services, but for suburban provider services as well. And that's what's shown on this slide. We call it replacement service providers here. That's the statutory definition, informally also referred to as either suburban providers or as opt-outs. There are 4 entities that we coordinate with, MBTA, Southwest, Maple Grove, and Plymouth. The University of Minnesota is not an opt-out, but is a separate public transit service provider, and we coordinate with the U in that role, including to pass through federal earnings that the U of M generates from operating its service. The council coordinates fare system policy across the region, as well as other policy measures that are in place and required by law. We fund, purchase, own, and replace over 300 vehicles that the suburban providers operate, as well as fare equipment on those vehicles. We pass through motor vehicle sales tax funds, as well as other funding as governed by statutory requirement and by regional policy. And then finally, we also match some of the federal funds that providers may seek, both through discretionary programs as well as through the regional solicitation that we'll describe in a moment. The other major function of MTS is to be the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the region. Within that, we operate a number of different transportation planning functions, many of these required by federal regulation, others by state statute. So for example, aviation planning, the state defines a role in aviation planning for the council that's not born of federal requirement, but is a state requirement. So it's really a mix of different functions. But we do, under federal regulation, plan for the region for various modes of surface transportation, highway, transit, freight, as well as regional services such as forecasting and data, and participation in corridor studies. We also participate in, by reviewing transportation elements of local comprehensive plans. In the previous session of, in a previous session of this group, Executive Director Barajas spoke about the Metropolitan Land Planning Act. MTS has a role in that, reviewing the transportation elements of comprehensive plans. So the legislative direction around transportation planning is shared here. You know, the primary being the designated agency for transportation planning, or the MPO. But there are other programs and requirements in law as well, both in how we evaluate the current performance of the system, programs in law such as the right-of-way loan acquisition program, or the RALPH program, as well as controlled access approvals for freeways or other changes in the region's transportation system, and review of matters of metropolitan significance. So if there's a significant development going in that has an effect on regional systems, we would be evaluating that from a transportation standpoint. Within the MPO role, it's really a cyclical process that is continuous evolution of developing a long-range transportation plan that's born of the council's regional development guide, affecting that into a transportation improvement program. So that's really selecting and reflecting projects for funding, and then evaluating the performance of the transportation system and reflecting that in updates to long-range plans, conducting studies, and other planning work. So while this process is continuously evolving, one constant throughout it is stakeholder involvement. primarily with local governments around the region, but also with federal and state partners and the general public as we conduct these various planning processes. The council is the designated MPO for the region. The council has been the Metropolitan Planning Organization under federal and state law since 1973, so now for 50 years. Federal agencies are fully aware and approve this status as the legal MPO, including numerous certifications and recertifications of our planning processes, most recently in 2021, typically a 3 or 4 year reauthorization cycle or certification cycle. The council is the designated recipient of transit dollars for the region. The council approves the long-range transportation plan and approves the transportation improvement program. So these are really reflective of the governor's 2020 Blue Ribbon Task Force, the findings of that group that are repeated here. There was interest in previous sessions of this group and what happens when there's broader areas that come into the region, and that's actually what's reflected in this map. Is in orange is the census definition of what must be incorporated as the urbanized area and this is actually the update. The red outline around that is actually the product of a smoothing process that the council undertakes with regional partners to identify the total geography of the planning area, and that's what's shown here. So a update to this for 2023 is that Wisconsin, based on a change in how the census has defined the urbanized area continuity process, actually means that Wisconsin is no longer part of the urbanized area. And so Wisconsin is no longer part of the MPO. Wright County and Sherburne County continue to be in the MPO and actually have expanded just a bit, and those are reflective. Those are reflected on the map where you see portions of those two counties within the urbanized area. I'll point out that because the metropolitan planning area is the 7-county area, we, through separate agreements, execute roles and responsibilities when the urbanized area goes beyond the 7-county area. And so we have that in place with Wright and Sherburne County that basically delineates roles and responsibilities in those effects. But we do incorporate their projects in the Transportation Improvement Program. We would also add relevant projects to the region's transportation plan when they're in effect. So right now, we actually are in the process of amending the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, to be reflective of a highway expansion project that is occurring on I-94 in that area. Through this work, we collaborate closely with the Transportation Advisory Board, and Chair Hovland, TAB Chair Hovland is here today. TAB is a 34-member board. It was created through state statute to advise the council's completion of MPO responsibilities. So I'll clarify that the council is the MPO. TAB advises the council as the MPO, and is comprised of 18 elected officials, so 10 selected by metro cities, 7 county board members, and 1 elected official from the Suburban Transit Association. There are 4 agency members that comprise state agencies, or in the council's case, a political subdivision. There are 8 citizen members and 4 modal members appointed by the Metropolitan Council to TAB to represent geographic areas around the region, as well as modes in the region. This is all established by statute 473-146, subdivision 4, which lays out the council's role in transportation planning and the role of TAB in advising the council on development of the plan and execution of planning processes. So within this, in the next slide, TAB really is a forum for elected officials and local officials and appointed members of the community really across geographic boundaries to look at and plan for regional systems in transportation. The TAB reviews and comments on regional plans and statewide plans. The tab solicits projects for potential funding of federal resources, notably through the regional solicitation process. One of the key responsibilities of tab is to execute the regional solicitation process. The 2022 solicitation identified nearly $350 million of federal funding to projects around the region. And the tab has opened the 2024 regional solicitation process now, where local governments and others, including nonprofits and transit providers, can submit projects for consideration to be selected next year for future years' funding. When projects are selected, TAB then recommends the Transportation Improvement Program, which is a 4-year program of projects that include federal transportation funds. So any project receiving federal transportation funds needs to be reflected in the TIP before US DOT can actually grant those funds to an organization. A new responsibility for TAB is upcoming and is actually a product of the 2023 transportation bill at the state level. TAB will select uses for active transportation funding from the regional transportation sales tax, and that reflects 5% of the 83% share coming to the council, or about $25 million per year will be designated by TAB for uses, and then the council will work to allocate those funds to those projects and programs. And then my final slide is really just describes in a bit more detail how roles and responsibilities are delineated. So we adopt a planning and programming guide that defines and describes the various roles of different groups. It describes different plans that are in place and the processes for funding and programming decisions as a region. This is further delineated in a memorandum of understanding that is actually between MnDOT and the Metropolitan Council, last executed in 2018. This corresponds to a federal requirement for such an agreement, but in this document is really where the role of TAB is defined and described. So documenting the continuing cooperative and comprehensive, or 3C, planning process, defining TAB's role in project selection and planning processes, including managing the regional solicitation, and then the federal certification of the MPO role and the concurrence of the council's role as the transit funding designated recipient. So these are executed by agreement of MnDOT and the council, and then that defines the TAB's role in detail as we execute various regional planning and programming processes.
Mr. Chair, I think we're ready for questions, so.
First of all, thank you, all three of you. This is very helpful, very thorough, and appreciate your work on this. So I already have a question from Commissioner Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if we can go to slide 16, just for context. So I just wanted to point out that on the locally led planning, project development, it's 100% county. And then drops down to 50 when you look at the engineering and construction phase for county. Then operating now, thanks to the legislature and the money, that now is all operation is now on Met Council. So just for context, I want to say that. The council started receiving the new 3/4 sales tax, 3/4 of a cent sales tax this month. And there still has been no communication about how that money will be spent or the process of how that will get figured out. And the council represents the entire region. And that sales tax is collected in the entire region. And yet the counties have really heard nothing about the plans for those funds. And the counties are starting to plan how we're going to be using the dedicated funding, thank you, Mr. Chair, that we received from the state and how we're planning on doing that, our local portion. And we need to plan that so that we're not doing duplicative efforts and all that other stuff. And so that's a little frustrating. So I'm hoping that at some point, you could talk to about how the council intends to be responsive to the entire region and how that sales tax funds are going to be invested. But the other question I had is, I believe at a recent meeting in October, beginning of October, October 4th, at a Met Council meeting, that it was disclosed that 14% of the new funds, only 14% of the new funds will be used for new projects. And so I know that a heavy amount of the new funding covers the operation costs. I get that, acknowledging that, but that 14% is still, needs to be planned. We need to know what the heck that's going for, so that we as local governments can also do that. So I guess I'll end with a question, which is, can you please tell us how the council intends? Like, is there going to be a process? Is there a timeline? Can you tell us how you're going to be responsive to the entire region so that cities that receive direct funding, counties that receive direct funding, when can we anticipate knowing something from the council and how you're going to be spending your money so that we can appropriately start planning and making sure that we're working together on this?
Thank you, Anyone want to take a crack at that one?
Mr. Chair,
Carlson?
I'll be happy to start and may turn it over to my colleague to speak on the Metro Transit side. There are a number of different processes underway. So one, at a big picture, is the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan will consider all funding sources, all modes, and has advisory structures in place actually to begin this is the broader regional conversation about transportation planning in the region. So there's an advisory committee in place. They've begun to discuss sort of the big picture of what new funding sources mean for the region, both the transit portion as well as the non-transit portion of new revenues. Within that, there's also more specific conversations that have begun with.
I'm sorry, Mr. Carlson, we're just going to do some troubleshooting on some audio for the virtual members here, so.
We're looking into it, guys.
They're just, I appreciate your flagging that, Commissioner.
You guys lost the,
What's it?
I think that
Oh,
laptop
okay, good.
somehow got locked. I don't know if that's.
Yeah.
This one is the LCC. Okay. All right, why don't say something and then we'll test into if Zoom can hear it now that we,
Testing.
say, do we, Commissioner Bingham, could you ask whoever you were asking if they heard it?
I had one person saying they can hear the live stream,
Okay.
and us. Senator Port, can you hear now? Senator Port, can you hear now?
Yes, a little.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just talk extra loud, I think.
All right. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So to recap, we have a broader regional planning process underway that has a number of both technical and policy advisory committee structures in place and works with the TAB around the big picture of the funding for transportation in the region. At the more specific provider level, we are initiating conversations with regional partners. There was one as recently as last Tuesday in Forest Lake that included both city and county representatives to talk about, what really are the gaps that locals see in the transportation system, what are the opportunities, what are the existing programs, and what kinds of improvements to those programs could we identify and coordinate around. No funding decisions at this point, but really an understanding of what gap areas may be that are underway as recently as this week, as we're continuing to coordinate.
Chair Hornstein, committee members, just specific to Metro Transit, building on what Executive Director Carlson shared, that there's multiple processes going on within Metro Transit. This is why we're kicking off our Metro Transit Forward process to really start a public conversation about, what are the interests and ideals that people have that we need to be considering as we build up our strategic plan that will then in turn shape future budget decisions. So that process is getting underway now.
Thank you. Commissioner, did you have a follow-up?
Just one point is that, those plans and those processes have been in place since, before the infusion of money that has come in and the urgent needs that you all have done, have been bringing up for obviously years, and they're real. We've woefully been underfunding transit and transportation for decades. So I'm not saying that, but at some point, in order to meet the needs of the region, we're going to need we're going to need the direction. We're going to need the plans. We're going to need the information. And we're going to need the partnership. And so that's the frustration that is being felt. And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll call on Mayor Hovland and then Ms. Paddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of different clarifying questions, I think. For Nick Thompson, to me, slides 11, 15, and 16 are interrelated. The Commissioner talked a little bit about slide 16. I think it might be worthwhile expressing and having this task force understand how those different roles are set, whether they're set by historic practice or they're based upon the law in terms of those funding allocations that are shown on slide 16. And then I've got a question for Charles Carlson after that.
Chair, Mayor, it does really depend on the mode. There is some law that guides who is in charge at what phase, and then what funding source. So, the projects, the best way to.
Pull that microphone over a little bit closer.
Probably the best way to think about it is to divide arterial BRT separate from light rail and dedicated BRT. Those light rail and dedicated BRT really start with the county-led local planning process. That has been both historical and, that is the current practice too. And so they would identify through there might be identified need that comes from a county planning process that identifies a route, and then when it transitions to the Met Council for delivery depends on timing of when the project is going to be built or what phase it's in. Arterial BRT is different in that we lead that process, but how it gets built is really dependent on the owner of the road it is being built on and what other projects we're coordinating with. That's why a local agency might be the builder of an arterial BRT just because they're, for instance, rebuilding a segment of road and they put our transit scope into their project. So it depends. There's been some historically, it's evolved clearly as we've learned. It started off with MnDOT as the lead agency on Hiawatha, and that was where the governor, per statute, the governor could choose which agency directed that. And we've, each project, I think, has a decision point where that decision is made, what makes best sense to deliver the project.
Follow on, Mr. Chair.
Mayor.
Yes, thank you. So one of our commenters, the Citizens Advocate for Regional Transit, would like the legislature to charge the Met Council with implementing universal transit governance. They've got a definition for that. So really what I took from that comment was that they'd like the Met Council to, with respect to metro projects, have authority over all aspects of it. So the question for you is, does Metro Projects Division think it has, at the existing time, statutory or regulatory authority to lead on the development of projects overall in the region? Or is it a continuation, you envision that based on the law, we're in a position where you have to continue the sort of practice you've had that you just described with respect to the particular project and particular levels of government being involved in different ways depending upon the project? Does that make sense?
Chair, Mayor,
Mr.
yes, makes sense. You know, I think it's a combination of current law and best practice. These major transways, the local funder is the county, and they need to have a strong say within that. But none of these are built by one agency. They are essentially a collaborative process from the day one. And, it needs to be state, county, and council delivering them. And, at each phase, we should have the right agency in the lead. And what is, we've built a vision in this, successful vision in this region. Projects have been delivered in this model. It's working well, especially if you look at our peers. It's a model that is complex for sure, but it is an effective model today.
Good. Mr. Chair, and then for Charles Carlson, I think a confirming sort of comment on my part on slide 30, where you're talking about the tab. One thing I thought it might be important for this task force to know is that the tab's recommendations that go to the Met Council can be either accepted or rejected by the Met Council, but they cannot be modified. And the composition of the tab is a majority of those folks are elected officials. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chair, Mayor, that's correct.
All right. And then with respect to Commissioner Bingham's question, I think one thing that might be helpful is if you describe what the composition of the technical and policy advisory committees are for the 2050 transportation planning work that's being done.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mayor. The 2050 plan, really the composition of the advisory groups reflect the composition of tabs. So city and county elected officials in the case of the advisory group, as well as transit providers, both the Metro Transit General Manager and a representative of the suburban transit providers are reviewing everything that goes before that group as it's developed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor Hovland, for your leadership on the tab. We're going to hear from, we'll have a question from Ms. Paddock and then Professor Orfield, and then we'll need to wrap up unless there's any other questions. And then last question will belong to Mr. Rockwell. Ms. Paddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a two-part question. The first is about municipal consent, and then the second part of the question will be how that relates to vision. So I attended a Robbinsdale City Council meeting last week, and Mayor Blonigan, there were more than 100 people there, and they were all in opposition to the BRT as it is currently planned.
And just to clarify, you're talking about the blue line.
The blue line.
Light rail transit, correct?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I said BRT.
Yeah.
I meant blue line. So those people didn't want it. They were massively against it. It sounded like it was the largest group of citizens that had appeared at a council meeting for God knows when. So at the end, Mayor Blonigan, speaking of Hennepin County and the Met Council, said, and this is the direct quote, "We cannot stop them, Hennepin and Met Council, if they choose to vote beyond our municipal consent to do this. God bless you if you can turn this around where the Southwest people couldn't turn it around, then I'm all for you." So there's a lot of question about is there or is there not municipal consent. Later on, Mayor Blonigan said, "Give me a piece of paper written by a lawyer assuring me that there is such a thing as municipal consent." Is there such a thing?
Mr. Thompson, yeah, Mr. Thompson, so the clarifying, what qualifies and what doesn't as municipal consent.
Chair and committee member, For Blue Line Extension, we follow state statute for LRT. That is the mode that is selected there. And there is a very clear municipal process, consent process as defined. And so we have communicated to each of the cities on that line that we anticipate that we'll be seeking their individual municipal consent next year in the timeline. And so state statute guides the municipal consent process for light rail transit. So yes, there is.
So, Mr. Chair,
Follow up, Ms. Paddock.
yes, they know that, but they don't really understand it. I think you mentioned earlier there was municipal consent with respect to LRT and municipal approval for BRT. Are those different things? I guess what I'm getting at is if a municipality ultimately says, as these people seem to be saying, we do not want LRT, we want BRT. So at some point, must you stop doing LRT? Not because you want to, but because the law requires it.
Chair, committee member. So in the state of Minnesota, municipal consent governs highway projects and light rail transit. And so we are following for that project, the light rail transit. We will seek next year the approval or support of light rail transit for each of the cities on the Blue Line extension. If they do not approve it, then we will, with our funding partners, decide the next step. So it's not we're not bringing to them a vote of whether it's LRT or BRT. The advisory corridor commission management committee for that project has voted to advise that LRT is the mode to bring forward in municipal consent. But this is a state law that we follow for that project. MnDOT follows municipal consent for highway projects, and each one's a little bit different. But the reason I mentioned that for BRT is there isn't state guidance or state law that applies to BRT. However, we want to know whether a city approves a BRT, so we seek, we've in essence follow that with our BRT projects, seeking local approval of BRT. That is very similar to municipal consent, but we do not call it that because there isn't state law on BRT yet. But we definitely move forward with the project, and we've demonstrated in the past 2 years on a project where one community said they did not want BRT, so we modified the project based on their input.
So then would,
Ms. Paddock.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead and last follow-up here.
Then could somebody on your staff write a letter to Mayor Blonigan and say, and just confirm that if their city council votes against the project as currently designed, they would have to stop the project?
Chair, committee, we are in weekly discussions with each city. We've communicated the process with them multiple times, and we're happy to, we'll continue that discussion with them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And may I ask my follow-up question?
Very quick, because we have Professor
Okay.
Warfield and a couple more questions over here, so.
So these people and others who have had problems with these projects have often objected on the basis of quality of life. And I noticed that the council's mission is, and this is a quote, to foster efficient and economic growth for a prosperous metropolitan region. So prosperity is the sole criterion. Quality of life is not part of the goal. And I noticed that the ENO group that we were referred to yesterday includes language about quality of life. It says their vision is for a transportation system that fosters economic vitality and improves the quality of life for all. Do you think quality of life should be an equal criterion to prosperity?
Anyone want to take that?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to. So the regional development guide that has been described here in the past has a number of different outcomes that include livability, a number of different things that really encompass quality of life comprehensively. Prosperity is not the sole goal of the council, even though it's reflected in that mission statement. And in that way, it's really as applied to the broader region's quality of life.
Thank you.
And thank you, and that's a good, we have 3 more questions, but that is actually, Ms. Paddock, a nice transition for the second part of our meeting. So Professor Orfield, Mr. Rockwell, and we'll end with Representative Koznick.
Mr. Chair, I think my questions are about the structure of the Met Council, so I can wait till that time in the hearing.
Okay, what we'll do is, after we conclude this transit discussion, then we'll talk, I think we'll get into your question. Ms. Rockwell.
Whoever I am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is kind of a joint question for Mr. Thompson and Ms. Kandaris on the kind of relationship of the arterial BRT process and some of the other kind of service delivery programs within Metro Transit. When I think of arterial BRT, you know, I think, Mr. Thompson, you described it as an improvement on local bus service, which obviously we like, and it's kind of not a thing, it's an amalgam of things, right? There's level boarding, there might be bus lanes, signal priority, et cetera. And we also do some of those interventions for local bus lines, just without turning them into a BRT or without turning them into our BRT yet. I rode my bike here this morning and saw all the bus lanes on Lake Street, and I hope 21 starts going on those before the B line. So I was excited by that. So you know, when I think about the opportunities, maybe this ties in a little bit to Commissioner Bingham's question and the opportunities with the new funding. We've been funding bus rapid transit largely through bonding, and that has been, you know, in part because that money's there, and in part because Metro Transit has been underfunded and hasn't had other money. And now we have this opportunity with a little bit more financial flexibility. Can you talk about maybe how that relationship between the service delivery and the ABRT planning has worked, and maybe how if it will change at all in terms of making kind of more incremental but faster, potentially network-wide changes before actually getting to the ABRT, like full ABRT upgrade?
Mr. Thompson.
Chair, committee member, that's a great question. Yeah, you know, our vision for fast, frequent, and reliable is not just dedicated to the transitways. And so we are doing transit signal priority on local routes, bus lanes on others that really do speed up any route. And so I think there's an outcome of the session was a new planning process for, you know, rapid transit for other routes besides ABRT. And so we doesn't have to wait for ABRT to get that. And so we have, you know, that can be implemented through our capital program. Sometimes it's implemented through a city project or a county project where we partner with a local agency. And so I'd say there's a blend of those two. You know, we are able to, you know, build our ABRT sort of at the speed of our local partners. They're often built with a local built road project, and so we need to align with when their construction is on certain routes. But maybe we can do interim and interventions to get some of the advantages of an ABRT prior to that. And so they're definitely, they go together, I would say.
Good. Thank you. And our last question to Representative Koznick. Before I call on Representative Koznick, I was thinking of you when I saw slide 20, because Representative Koznick did a very important amendment to the 2021 transportation bill that I think helped to stabilize the Metro mobility funding. And so I've thanked you. I'll thank you again. That was a really important development. So I appreciate that. Your question.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair, for pointing that out, and I also appreciate your support in bringing Metro Mobility to the Lakeville community who was being taxed for the transit services but not having access to the Metro Mobility. So that's been a nice amenity into our community. But I wanted to build off of Ms. Paddock's questions about municipal consent, and we have different forms of transit, but it sounds like we have different requirements for actual municipal consent, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but what would the council's position be on requiring municipal consent on all forms of transit?
Mr. Thompson.
Chair and member, I think there has been a recent proposed legislation around BRT that was very similar in nature, if I recall, to LRT, that we were open to that discussion. I think it's a good process. For arterial BRT, what we do is we generally seek local approval of a corridor management plan, because our arterial BRT is an existing route that we're upgrading stations often. I don't think municipal consent is necessarily applicable to an arterial BRT, but dedicated BRT, our LRT statute, I think, is strong. These projects are best when the local cities approve them. These projects perform the best when the cities, think about their land use around these projects. And so we really want to build these projects in where communities want them and where they're going to adapt their land use to really get the benefits of these projects. And so I think, Minnesota is kind of a leader in this municipal approval for these major transitways, and I'm sure we're open for that discussion on BRT.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair,
Follow-up.
and I appreciate the response. Along with that, I think I would encourage as the chair of the committee, and I've served on the committee, to also take a look at the differences in operating subsidies and who pays for that based on the different line. Just because it's a line instead of a colored line or a lettered line, there's disparities there that I don't think serve all communities equally. So I look forward to having that discussion some more as well.
I think it's a good point, and we have obviously many different modes of transit that have varying degrees of subsidy, and I think it's a good conversation to have. So members, thank you very much. This was really helpful, and we appreciate the time you took to testify and prepare your presentation and answer the questions. So thank you again for your work. So one last thing that we want to do before we enter into our broader committee discussion. Members will know that we've had some conversation about the Met Council as a state agency, a local unit of government, et cetera. I know that this is a number of members, but particularly Professor Orfield has been interested in having a conversation about this with the task force. And a letter was sent out to the Met Council. The Met Council responded, and just wanted, they're here, they're available, they're not necessarily testifying on this topic, but if anyone on the task force has any points that they want to make about that or questions, we can take a few minutes for that. And, again, this is just, we'll treat this as normal testifying, give and take, but I want to limit the conversation just because we have to move on to the next thing. So maybe one or two questions and one or two follow-ups would be appropriate, and then I think we can move on. So is there any conversation from the, the general counsel does want to come up. I imagine there'll be a question directed to you. I'm anticipating that. So please, again, not to testify, but I think we will have a question. So. Professor Orfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm just referring, we sent the letter to the Met Council a week or two ago, October 13th, asking it a number of questions about its constitutional status, whether it was a local government, state agency, or a special district. And then the council responded on October 18th to that letter. And I wanted to ask the general counsel and Ann Bloodhart, whoever's representing her, the first, I have two questions and two follow-ups.
Well, why don't we just do two,
Yeah.
and then we'll.
Yeah.
I just have a Forgive me, just this morning, it has come to my attention, and forgive me, I didn't have an opportunity to speak to you privately about this. I did not know that there was litigation involving the Met Council, and I don't know that it has anything to do with the questions that you're asking. But I think since that disclosure was not made to us previously, I want to make sure that any questions that are being asked in the purview of this committee and not to further any other cause or event. So
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Under those parameters,
Certainly.
Mr. Orfield,
Yeah, sure.
we want to make sure that.
Yes,
you're-
I can't imagine what it is, but I'd be happy to agree that it's just for purposes of this hearing. But at any rate, we asked those council the questions, and the council answers, the law is well settled that a municipal corporation has only such powers as are expressly conferred on it by statute or necessarily implied. And they cite the Borgeld case. And it seems the council is suggesting that they are a home rule municipality by citing this case for authority, citing the Borgeld cases. Am I right in understanding the citation of this case and using this to explain your authority that the council is a home rule municipality?
Representative
Counsel.
Hornstein, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Representative Hornstein, Mr. Orfield, the council is a public corporation and a political subdivision. We apply the same law from the Borgeld case as under our statutes that are setting us up as a political corporation and a political subdivision. So I guess I'm not understanding your question. We operate within the parameters that the legislature gives us.
This is
Follow-up.
a follow-up. Well, the Borgeld case involves only municipal corporations. It doesn't involve anything except municipal corporations. And I'm wondering why you'd cite that as a basis for your authority if you weren't a municipal corporation. It doesn't have any purview outside of that context. So if you aren't a municipal corporation, and I wonder why you cite this, and if you are a municipal corporation, as this suggests, wouldn't the 473, Chapter 473, which mentions the council by name, wouldn't that be special legislation that violates the Constitution, Article 12, Section 2?
council, and then we'll have one more
I got
follow-up and we'll move on.
Representative Hornstein and Mr. Orfield, the council is a public corporation and a political subdivision. We were legislative created as that. We operate within the bounds that the legislature has given us. I disagree with your assertion that the council was not constitutionally formed, but that really is a question that the legislature would need to answer for itself. The council believes that it is acting within its scope of authority that was appropriately legislatively granted to it.
One last question, and then we'll move on.
And one question or follow-up. This is my second question. We ask you in this letter to find another political subdivision that is not a directly elected local government. We also ask you to find a public authority that is neither a local government, state agency, or special purpose district. So we ask you this question. Why didn't you answer that question?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Orfield, we advise the Metropolitan Council, and that is what our job is. And what we advise the Metropolitan Council is to operate within the authority that has been given to us by the legislature. We do not question the constitutionality of the statutes the legislature has passed. I believe that the state law is clear on that. There is a statute 645.023, which exempts from the special legislation requirement of local approval for those contiguous bodies of over 1 million. And that has also been approved by the Minnesota Supreme Court. So I believe those questions have been answered, but again, it's not appropriate for me to answer those questions for the legislature. The legislature needs to answer those questions. We simply review the statutes that the legislature has provided to us, and we operate within those statutes.
This will be our last
I just want to,
question.
it's concluding, we asked the council whether it's a local government, it didn't answer that question. We asked the council whether it's a state agency, it didn't answer that question. We asked it whether it's a special district or public authority. It didn't answer this question. It said it's a public corporation, a political subdivision. We asked it whether there is a political corporation that isn't one of the three things, a local government, state agency, or special district. They didn't answer that question. We asked them whether there is another special district, another political subdivision. There's no local elected government, and they didn't answer those
Okay,
questions.
Professor Orfield, so again,
all.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Representative Koznick, and then we'll move on.
Well, thank you. I'm just a little concerned around the whole premise here, what we're actually doing. I appreciate the questions, I guess, and then they're good things to perhaps discuss. I appreciate the council being here. But I don't think it's been, one of the purposes of the whole committee is to add transparency and accountability. And I'm a little concerned, as Representative Kleborn had mentioned, and I was made aware a couple days previous, that Mr. Orfield is party to a lawsuit or of local counsel and a litigant, party to the litigants to provide information or be a resource, subject matter expert on a lawsuit, but that hasn't been disclosed. And help me understand that there is a differentiation, and because it looks like a conflict of interest to me when you're grilling the Met Council, and I'm no fan of defending the Met Council. I think that record's pretty well clear, but I think for the transparency of the task force, what are you really getting at? And I think your participation in that lawsuit, and we have another lawyer, maybe he has a different opinion. I've talked to a few people in House nonpartisan, but I'm not sure where we're going with this, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure that it's fully appropriate. So
Well,
if we
let
could
me-
have some clarification
Okay,
among the task
yeah,
members.
no,
Can I answer that?
okay, I think you directed the
Yeah,
question
you
to
did.
Professor Orfield. I'll make a comment, and then we'll move on.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm not aware of any conflict. I am not a party to any litigation of the Met Council. I'm not a counsel to any litigation of the Met Council. I have been an expert witness in a fair housing case about this, but I don't believe there's any conflict. If there's a conflict, I wish that the representatives would make it clear so I can respond to that. I'd be happy to respond to any allegation of conflict of interest. I think this is without any basis. But these questions are questions we've all asked at one point. Is the council a local government? I think we've all asked this question, and I don't think it relates to any particular issue of fair housing, which is that other case. It's just a basic question about what form of government it is. We've asked the council whether it's a state agency. We've all asked that question. We've asked the council whether it's a special district. It's not particular me, I think, but.
Professor, yeah, we've
Yeah.
gone through that. I
Yep.
just,
Yeah.
I appreciate your answer.
Yep.
I appreciate your question. Let me just make a concluding comment, because we do need to move on. This has been an issue that Professor Orfield and several others have raised. I think it's relevant to our deliberations because, as I've often said twice to different reporters who have asked me a question, I remind people that the Met Council is a creature of the legislature. The legislature created the Met Council. If there are issues with the Met Council, if there are concerns with the Met Council, if changes need to be made, or if things are working well and changes don't need to be made, or maybe there's a portion of the Met Council that deserves more attention than others. Those are the purview of this committee. It is ultimately the legislature's responsibility. So I think that getting some clarity on that is important. I appreciate Professor Orfield bringing this, but I think we're kind of moving past this conversation, moving past this discussion now, and actually transitioning into a broader conversation about what do we want to see coming out of this task force. That's actually the next agenda item. I'll take a comment from Mayor Hovland, and then we will move on, and with thanks to council for being here. Mayor Hovland.
Question for you, Mr. Chair, and possibly others. I don't know about this lawsuit against the Met Council. I don't know who brought the lawsuit, the substance of the case. I think it might be worthwhile for us to know that, because
Yeah.
we might inadvertently stumble into something that assists one side or the other, and so I think we should know more about that, whether it's today or later on, I don't know. And I concur with you that if this organization that's been in existence for over 50 years serving the region, that there's some question about its legal basis for existing, that's a legislative issue.
Correct. And so I will just say in conclusion here, I would trust counsel of the Met Council to not answer questions if there were any court problems here.
Correct.
And they're here, they cooperated fully, perhaps not to the you know, Professor Orfield has said here on the record he doesn't feel the questions were answered. Fine. You were here. I appreciate that. I appreciated your letter. And I think it's helpful for us as we continue our deliberations. Last comment for Chair Cleavorn. Oh, yes, and Senator Pratt, and then we will move on. Chair Cleavorn, Senator Pratt, we'll move on.
I just want to be perfectly clear. I was not accusing in any way Professor Orfield of having a conflict of interest. I said I just wanted to make sure that the questions are fully intended for the work of this task force,
Yeah.
period. That's it.
Thank you, and I believe they have. We'll take Senator Pratt, and then we need to move on. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you and Representative Kosnick covered my concerns very well. I'll accept.
Thank you, Senator Pratt.
I'm sorry,
Chair,
Mr.
though.
Chair, but one thing that's important relative to this, if Professor Orfield said he was testifying as an expert witness, I don't know who for, but I do think if you're being compensated for that testimony, we should know that.
Okay, here's how I'm going to handle this. I'm going to ask Professor Orfield to answer that question if council wants the last word, but we have a very important discussion that I don't want to get short shrifted. So, Professor Orfield.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer questions. I think we should discuss this particular matter. If it's certainly relevant to this case, if we'd like to, the fair housing case. I don't think it relates to the structure of the Met Council, but I'm certainly be happy to answer questions. I don't believe there's a conflict of interest. This is the first I've heard of it. I'd be happy to answer any questions by council, any kind of questions at all. I've been not compensated in any way. I think this is a red herring, but I'd be delighted to fully answer any questions and clear up any particular issue. And I think these questions are important and not just asked by me, but by the public.
Thank you. And again, as I said, I think it is in the purview of this task force. Council, we'll give you the last word.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
I'm sorry. Before you, we'll have Representative Kosnick, I think, is responding to Professor Orfield.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate having the discussion a little bit, and I don't want to dominate the meeting. But to the lawsuit on, my understanding, it's to do with fair housing, and we had previously a discussion in this task force, either last meeting or the meeting before. We were talking with the Met Council about some of their housing policy. I specifically made comments that I might have been a little bit more guarded in my comments, knowing that another task member was participating in a lawsuit specifically to housing. And so it's kind of a concern to me because I made those comments specifically. I recognize Professor Orfield, maybe not getting compensated, and but I just think the transparency is lacking. And that's, for a task force that's, one of our main purposes is to be more accountable to our constituents of the cities and the counties that has a concern that I think, maybe we can talk about it. My impression was that there was some discussion about it outside of the meetings, which is appropriate for the chair. But I think for the overall task force members, we should have a better understanding. So I appreciate you taking the consideration of that. And I don't know how much you want to get into it now, but that is my concern, is that I'm not a party to that lawsuit, but comments that we make may or may not be used to that, and I'm just not sure that where my comfort level is with that.
Okay, Commissioner Green wanted to make a very short comment. I'll respond to you, Representative Kosnick, and then we will move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate you recognizing me, and I apologize to our presenters and also all of you for having to be late this morning. I was triple booked and sped over here as fast as I could. The comment that I would like to make is off of this particular topic, but it's something that I want to sort of register with my fellow task force members, which is an extreme interest in how vision is set for the Met Council and for the region. And from understanding the slides and conversations I've been a part of, it seems the emphasis is the 2050 plan and then also Metro Transit Forward, which is described as a strategic vision to guide operations. I think that there's something there that is not serving our region to the best of our need and capability. And I know that we're all passionate about this and we want to find the best way forward for our region. And I just want to flag that as an area of extreme interest because it has enormous ramifications. And I think that I want to make sure that we look forward and have this like bigger, broader horizon for what it is that we want our region to be pointed towards. And some of these details of history are important, but we are in a position to set what we want. And that's what I'd like to spend some time on.
And that's what is next on the agenda. We may be able to start that conversation today. We probably will end doing more of that at a future meeting because that conversation needs to happen. I did want to respond to Representative Koznick. You asked an important question. There was a conversation among several members about having some of these questions asked. Professor Orfield wrote a letter. The letter was circulated to task force members. A response was given from task force members, two task force members from the Met Council. And we had a short discussion of something that was being discussed several times in the task force. I allotted a limited amount of time for that conversation. I think it's very relevant to the task force. And we've had that conversation and we're ready to move on. I don't see a conflict of interest. I don't see anything untowards happening here. I think it's, again, a very relevant and important conversation. I appreciate Professor Orfield bringing it up. I appreciate council coming and responding and the questions that were asked. And we're ready to move on. We've had this discussion, but it is, and I will just return to what I said at the beginning. The Met Council is a creature of the legislature. If there are issues related to any topics, whether it's the conversation we just had with council or structure or governance, it's up to the legislature. That's why we have this task force. We've had, as I've said before, we've had many task forces. We've had many people examine whether it's the legislative auditor, or the Blue Ribbon Commission, or the Citizens League. This is a legislatively initiated and directed task force. And I think we have a responsibility as legislators. And we may, I don't know ultimately what we'll come up with. I've had some ideas. Those have shifted and changed, and I get new information every meeting. And I'm really excited about the next couple of months, because now we're going to dig in to the very issue that we have been tasked with. So I would love council just, if you've heard a lot here, and if you want to just give us your last word and perspective, and then we can move on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, task force members. I just want to apologize. I don't think this has been my most articulate day ever. I do want to be clear.
I think you've been great, so no problem.
The council is not a state agency. We don't claim to be a state agency. And for everything else, I would refer to my letter response of October 18th, 2023, where we address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So members, let me tee up our next discussion. And we're not going to be able to get all of this done today, but I think this speaks very much to Commissioner Green's last comment. And thank you, Council. We're sort of at halftime, if we're going to use a football analogy. We have, or soccer, we have, had a lot of background information that's necessary for us to make some informed decisions. We have looked at each division of the Met Council thoroughly. We have looked at the budget of the Met Council. We have looked at previous reports about Met Council governance. And so we've had many testifiers and a lot of great interaction among task force members and our guests. We're now ready to transition into two new and important phases. The first is really now looking at different governance models from around the country. new ideas that the task force members have. We'll be embarking on a public process where we go out to all parts of the region and hear people who have a direct stake in Met Council deliberations, sharing their ideas and their visions. And we've had, of course, public testifiers coming in, and we'll have a few today. But what we haven't done, and what I think is so needed, is for us to have an internal conversation among ourselves about what are our values, what would we like to see in a Met Council. I want to thank Ms. Paddock for, bringing this idea forward. And we're going to start this discussion today. I think that we may have some time next Wednesday and certainly Wednesday the 8th to continue the discussion. It's not just for 15 minutes. This is a longer conversation that we need to have. And maybe it is good to have it in two parts so that we can start the discussion today and then people can noodle over it and think about it and come back with some new ideas. But in introducing this conversation, I want to just say that we're not, at this juncture, talking about your ideas for a, whether it's an elected Met Council or a COG or a combination of elected or appointed or staggered terms. This is not what we're talking about now. What we're talking about is really, what are some things that, when we talk about values, looking at, the Met Council's performance, some of the issues around, we've heard a lot, Representative Koznick, again, talking about accountability and transparency. Ms. Paddock has raised issues of credibility, that we want a regional structure that has credibility and is actually fulfilling its mission, competently and robustly. And so, thinking about those words and those concepts, I think might help guide us in this discussion. What we're going to do is Ms. Kohler is going to be writing down different ideas and concepts, and then we'll go from there. And what I'd like to do, we already have two people queued up to just share some ideas, and three now. I'm going to start with Representative Wiens, then Senator Pratt, then Ms. Paddock. So I know that Representative and Senator are joining us virtually, and so I'm going to start with Representative Wiens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you have so aptly said, this process is about a creature of the legislature, and so that we're in that season, it has just kind of illuminated to me that the process that we use that we're elucidating today should be a simple one in the sense of what's the art of the doable in the time constraints and our authorities. And so I kind of look at the problem statement that we're trying to solve. Is it the small, fixing the knowns, or is it a bigger scope where it is what we think in the future is going to be an issue that we want to address as well? And maybe there's a hybrid in between. As far as the values go, I'm developing those, but I think I started off with whatever we do, it's about accountability, responsibility, transparency, and oversight, so that it is apparent to our citizens that the Met Council or the activities of the Met Council are available for those four different values: accountability, responsibility, transparency, and oversight. And the last thing I'd like to just point out is thank you for the opportunity to have a distributed Zoom-type interaction during this time period. That is all.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, certainly accountability, transparency are important parts of this discussion. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're also looking at the scope of what we want to be regionalized. I think over the years, we've put some functions within the Metropolitan Council for not knowing what else to do with them, and I think we need to look at what the council does well, what it doesn't do well. I share the concerns that Professor Orfield read around constitutionality. I don't know that it's the Met Council's role to define that. I think any conflict with the Constitution was an act of the legislature, and I want to make sure that we do keep that in mind so that we can put that argument to rest once and for all. And then I think, the last piece is to define the constituencies that we have. We have some, and making sure that we have a governance structure that fits the constituency that they serve.
Excellent points, Senator Pratt. I appreciate that. I think we had Ms. Paddock and then Professor Orfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say a few words, first of all, about just this general concept. Every one of us here came to this meeting with preconceived ideas. I know that I had mine, we all have ours, and we could just arm wrestle to a solution. I mean, that would be one way to approach it. I don't think that's what the legislature was asking us to do. I think they were saying to us, we have a problem here. So first of all, we need to identify the problem. And then we have to say, in solving the problem, we want the answer to be true to these values. So back when we were in high school, we all took algebra, and we all learned the concept of solving for X. So what is X here? We need to define what X is. And then we solve the equation, and we go back to the legislature and to the public and have a cogent, saleable package, not random. I went in and I fought for this idea and I prevailed or I lost or whatever. We have to have a rationale. If there is no X, if we don't know what we're solving for, then any solution is as good as any other solution. So somebody earlier talked about, I personally have 3 things that I think we should solve for. This is my idea. First of all, we have to have competence. And that includes performance and customer service and safety and operations and fiscal practices, just competence. We have to have accountability. So does this organization govern by the consent of the governed? And going back to Commissioner Green's question, what is the vision? What is the vision? And are you accountable for the vision? The question I asked earlier, where's the quality of life, in the vision? I didn't see that in the vision. And thirdly, I think the third thing that we need to solve for is credibility. Because obviously we don't have it now. I mean, there are many, many communities probably for whom the Met Council is credible, but many for which it is not. So do people trust this organization? And I think that sort of is a function of the first 2 things. If it's competent and if it's accountable, then it will be credible. So I would propose those 3 things as what X is. There are 3 X's that we need to solve for. And if we set them up, or whatever, maybe other criteria, maybe those don't work for this group, then when we come across different solutions, proposed solutions, we can say, does this make us accountable? Does this make us credible? Does this make it competent? So we have some standards. We can go back to the legislature and say, we put this package together for these reasons, And that also makes us transparent.
Thank you. So I'm going to take, we're going to, this conversation will continue, but I wanted to, at least the people that raised their hands for recognition, I'm going to call on them, and if people can make their comments relatively short, we'll have plenty of time in future meetings to elaborate. When you talked about the algebra equation, though, I had to remember my algebra teacher, Mr. Mitchell, who used to hand back the tests in order of your grade, and I was often at the one of the last to get their test back. Anyway, we have Professor Orfield, Chair Cleavorn, Commissioner Bingham, and then Senator Port. You get the last word today on this topic. Professor.
Thank you. In some ways, I feel chagrined in this, that I was the author of this legislation that created the modern Metropolitan Council and have been a critic of the non-elected status. People say, what, the answer is the legislature. We have to decide, they have to decide. I'm no longer a member of the legislature. I haven't been for 23 years, but it's true. But at the time this legislation was passed, I was worried about its constitutionality and said so on the floor of the House, and so did Representative Plenty, so did the Citizens League, so did many people. And I'd hoped that things would evolve, that would change. It may be completely sound. I mean, what's happening here may be sound, but it certainly was raised. The legislature was concerned about this, and commentators were. I think that regional planning is good. I think it's good to think about transportation and housing and land use together. I think this is the most important thing we can do. I mean, I think it's the future of our society. The question is when we give something a lot of power, a lot of discretion, when we give it taxing power in the United States, at least by long tradition, it's been elected. Whether it's
Professor Orfield, thank you, but we want to just again focus on more. I liked what you said about regional planning, but we don't want to get into sort of models at this point. But the value of regional planning, I think, is an important part of your point. So great, Chair Cleavorn.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Hornstein. And I want to start off with, there are a lot of assumptions about who's on this task force, what's happening with this task force, what people come in. I came into this task force with zero preconceived notions. I came to this task force with the idea of saying, what's working well, what's not working well, is the structure in place of such either flexibility or structure that allows the Met Council to do the charge that they're given in a competent way, right? So I think the piece that we are charged with is truly understanding what do they do well? And when they're not doing it well, have we empowered them either too much or too little to do it well? And I do believe that it takes the values that Ms. Paddock laid out, and competency, we don't all define it the same way. So when I hear you use the word competency, I'm defining it with my terms, and my term was knowledge, ability, scope. That to me is competence. So we have to make sure if we're using these words that we're also talking about how are we defining those words so that we are setting up this organization that we have charged to do work of regional planning, which I think is really important to be successful. So that's what I'm looking for out of this task force.
I appreciate all of those comments and particularly what you said, Chair Cleavorn, about preconceived notions. Next up, Commissioner Bingham, and then we'll conclude with Senator Port, and we have a few people that wanted to do some public testimony.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very brief. I think one of the values that we need to consider is responsibility. Responsibility to local governments, responsibility to the public, responsibility to our businesses in the form of economic development, responsibility to housing, all the clean water, sewer, stormwater, all the things that they're responsible for. And again, in my comments earlier, I talked about how they are the council is responsible to the region. So, I mean, I think that's the big umbrella and then breaking that down. But I think that's a big word that should be up there with the likes of the accountability, transparency, credibility, competency, that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be really quick. I think the overall conversation today has been really helpful in guiding us towards values. And I am a believer that government can be a force for good when it is people-centered. And so I think as we start looking to move these values towards models, I think we should continue to ask ourselves, is this model going to allow them to be centered on the people that they serve? That is the role of government. That is what government should be doing. We have it listed in a lot of different ways: accountability, responsibility, credibility. But I think the more that we can center the people who the Met Council serves through housing, through transit, through water systems, all of those, the more likely we are to find a system that actually does serve those people.
Appreciate that, Senator Port. So, members, what I'd like to do here before we call on the public testimony is, maybe a little homework assignment. Think about what we started off on here. And, I'll be working with Ms. Kohler on fitting this into our next agenda or the one after that, so that we can allow these ideas to percolate. I think, again, all joking about Mr. Mitchell aside, I think looking at this as sort of an equation with an end result is a good way to frame this. And so I appreciate all the comments that people made, and we need to hear more from task force members as to your ideas and your expectations for what this is about and where we're headed. So I appreciated that, Chair Cleaborn. Members, before we're going to have public testimony and then adjournment, and before we adjourn, I will outline the next meeting, and we're having one extra one, and I'll tell you the reason why that we're meeting next Wednesday. But now we have written testimony from Matthews Hollinshead, who's a member of the TAB. Is Matthews on? He's on. We do have your written testimony. Maybe you could summarize it for us on the record here. And so welcome to the committee, and please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm honored to be here, and your work is so important. I am a member of the TAB. I'm a transit modal representative, one of two of them on the TAB. As you know, we deliberate and disseminate some $200 million per grant cycle. About 27% of it is for transit. I just want to say on the question of values, since that's what you were focusing on in the second segment of the meeting, I think we live in a region. I don't live in Ramsey County. I don't live in St. Paul. I live all over the region if you define life as mobility as being part of living. And so I think it's important for all of us, voters, constituents, leaders, staff members, to understand that we live in a region, and that's the organic whole that is most central to the work of this task force. So I'm not going to recite my written testimony. You have it in your packet, but I will just summarize and say I think that the direction that needs to happen is towards a greater representation of individual citizens directly with the Met Council and not a council of governments. So I'll just make that statement, even though you're not there yet, considering different models. I want to suggest to you a thought experiment. We have 5 transitway projects, the 3 originals, Blue Line, Green Line, and Gold Line under construction now, and the 2 extensions, Blue and Green Line. I want to suggest a thought experiment what if over the past 25 years of these development of these projects, these transitways, what if we had had a directly elected Met Council? How would that have changed the process? Would we be at the point we are now with the cost overruns and the delays? Or would direct representation have been able to address those things much, much earlier in the process so that we could be more efficient, more cost effective, and have those online and operating for several years now instead of waiting for them? On the other hand, if you went to a total council of governments, would it be better or not? I think that's a thought experiment that can help everybody understand whether we need structural changes in the Met Council. A second thought experiment I would suggest is I want to hypothesize a household of perhaps 65,000 gross income, 3 earners, 5 jobs, all different destinations, all different schedules. Transit will maybe never be able to serve that household directly. However, we need a lot more of it to even try. With various models of the Met Council, how would that household be better served? Would it be better served if they were aware of a direct constituent relationship with a directly elected Met Council member that they could go to with their concerns and their needs? Or would they be better served with the governments we have, the strong governments, the municipal governments, the county governments that we have, and a Met Council that's simply trying to coordinate, sort of like the United Nations or the U.S. Senate? I think that would be a useful thought experiment. So in the interest of time, I'm going to end my remarks there. I'd be happy to answer some questions if you have them, but otherwise, my testimony is on paper in your packets, and I hope you get something from it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Hollinshead, and thank you for all of your work that you've done over many years on the issues that are before us today. We have one other member of the public, Jim Shetler, has testified last time, but does have a quick addendum that he wants to address. It's in our packets, but wanted to allow you the opportunity to testify before us about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the task force.
And state your name again for the record.
Jim Shetler, resident of St. Paul. I just want to remind everyone, as we have covered transit today, there are a great many people who cannot drive, who should not drive, and an even much bigger group of people who would much prefer not to have to drive to get to many of the things that they do in their daily life. Now, I'd like to refer that background to you in the context of the, I think it's number 13, called Building the Regional Transit Network, the map that you saw. And that was a map focused on downtown Minneapolis. Now, is that the future of transit? Is that going to meet the needs of all of these people who can't drive or prefer not to drive, especially in our suburban area in the future? And I would suggest to you that that is not the route to go. And if you look at what we have supplied today to you, we've suggested a concept we called universal transit mobility. And that is a direct reflection, actually, of what we have with the automobile. We have universal vehicular mobility right now. What can we do to replicate that as well as possible throughout the urban service area for these people? So we submit that. I mentioned the group I represent, Citizen Advocates for Regional Transit. We clearly need, as has been expressed here today, I think, a much better concept of what 21st century transit needs to be. So I'll end with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shetler. And just a couple of thoughts here. We had a testifier last week or last time, 2 weeks ago, that talked about the suburb to suburb issues. And so I think that's important. And we also, just for folks who may not follow the Transportation Committee of the House every day, it was a Representative Petersburg bill I co-authored with him. He was the lead author. A post-COVID transit study that's due to the legislature. And I think, I think it was Mr. Carlson's testimony that, it's interesting, and we don't know what will happen, in the years post-COVID, but I noted that 89%, we're back at 89% of pre-COVID levels for arterial BRT and local bus, but we're now still at 26% for commuter lines. What does that mean for planning in the future? So, I think that's just important, Mr. Shetler, that you raised that. So members, as we adjourn, I just wanted to let folks know we are meeting next week. And the reason we're not doing the every other week situation is that one of the models that has been talked about, and people have strong feelings about this one, so come with your questions. Portland has direct election. The Center for Transportation Studies is bringing in the chair of the Portland Metro for a conference, and that individual is able to testify in person because they're going to be in town anyway. And so come with your questions about what works and doesn't work there. We are going to also be talking about COGS in more detail. At the end of the month, we'll have people joining us from Denver virtually. And we are going to look at using our November 8th meeting for other ideas. Are things working well? We could do, people wanted to discuss staggered terms, things like this. We focus so much on election and COG, but there are other ways. Other ideas to consider as well. So we're going to use a little time on November 8th for those ideas, and either task force members or members of the public or others with expertise could come in. So also TriMet, which is the transit provider for Portland, will also be available next week. So, Mayor.
Mr. Chair, while you're talking about Portland, I think I had sent a note to staff that I had conversation with former Mayor Charles Hales from Portland, who would also, he might be available remotely.
Yes.
To be able to give his observations as an elected official.
Yeah.
On the strengths and weaknesses of their model.
Yeah, we will.
I could check to see, based on your schedule, I could check to see if he's available.
If you could work with staff on that,
All right, we'll talk to
and
Taylor
maybe he
about
could join us next week or in a future meeting.
All right, thank you.
With that, there's no more business before the task force, and I thank everybody for their attendance and their contributions, and we are adjourned.
Recording stopped.
So, Mr. Chair, if you guys come out and chat.